Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. Math failed to miracle, how one mistake unlocked a new branch of science. Logan Henderson sat at his desk in the vast examination hall of the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences, his fingers drumming lightly against the transparent surface of his holographic console. Around him, students of various alien species worked in silence, their eyes, some glowing, some shifting in color, some entirely mechanical, fixed on their own screens as they navigated through the most difficult mathematics exam in the known universe. Tension in the air was thick, heavier than the artificial gravity holding them all in place. He inhaled deeply, exhaling slowly through his nose. He had spent countless sleepless nights preparing for this exam, knowing that his status as the only human in the academy meant that every result, every mistake, every achievement would reflect not just on himself, but on his entire species. The Galactic Academy did not accept mediocrity. It was a place for the brightest minds across the universe, where intellectual superiority determined one's value more than physical prowess or political status. The professor, a Zillion named Professor Orok, observed the students from a raised platform at the front of the hall. His elongated form shimmered faintly under the artificial lighting, and the 6 luminescent eyes scattered across his smooth, translucent head moved independently, tracking multiple students at once. He did not need to speak. His mere presence commanded obedience. Logan forced himself to focus on the first problem. The equations flowed in midair above his console, shifting slightly as he interacted with them. Galactic mathematics was different from anything he had ever encountered on Earth. The symbols moved, adjusted themselves in real time based on complex quantum interactions. Numbers weren't just numbers. They carried energy states, dimensional probabilities, and gravitational constants that fluctuated depending on their relation to the fabric of space-time itself. But he was ready. His hands moved quickly, adjusting variables, rewriting expressions, and reconfiguring unknowns. Unlike the others who relied on the Academy's standard computational models, Logan had spent weeks analyzing the logic behind these equations, searching for deeper patterns. His mind worked differently from his alien peers. Where they followed rules, he questioned them. Where they sought solutions within existing frameworks, he searched for entirely new perspectives. Time slipped away unnoticed as he worked, the hum of the Academy's energy field fading into the background. One by one, the problems dissolved as he reached their conclusions, but something inside him whispered that his answers were different. He had not just solved the equations, he had rewritten them. His logic led him down paths that had never been explored before, paths that felt more natural, more intuitive. When the final problem appeared, he hesitated for the first time. It was a paradoxical function, a theoretical construct meant to measure a student's ability to work within the accepted laws of galactic physics. The goal was to balance the equation using known universal constants, but Logan saw something else, a flaw, a fundamental inconsistency that no one had ever noticed before. His pulse quickened. Carefully, he adjusted the variables, disregarding the accepted methodology. He removed unnecessary components, redefined constants, and at last wrote an entirely new equation, one that resolved the paradox in a way no one had ever attempted. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He had done it. Logan pressed the submit button, feeling a wave of exhaustion and relief wash over him. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, his muscles relaxing for the first time in hours. Around him, other students were still working, their eyes flickering with concentration, their fingers gliding over the holographic interfaces with practiced precision. Some of them would finish early, others would struggle until the last second. But Logan had no doubt that he had given his best effort. Minutes passed. Then, one by one, the results began appearing on the students' screens. Soft murmurs filled the air as numbers materialized in glowing text. High scores, a few perfect marks, some barely passing grades. Logan straightened in his seat as his own result loaded. Then the world went silent. 0%. He blinked, his breath caught in his throat. He read the number again, certain there had been a mistake, but the number did not change. A few students nearby noticed and exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to amusement. A soft chuckle echoed through the hall, then another. Someone muttered something in a language Logan didn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable, mockery. His skin burned, not from anger but from sheer disbelief. How could this be? A 0? Had he made a careless mistake? Had he misunderstood the questions? Professor Orok's voice, deep and resonant, cut through the whispers. Henderson remained seated. The room fell completely silent. The professor's 6 eyes locked onto Logan's screen as he floated forward, his long luminescent fingers moving through the holographic interface. Logan swallowed hard, watching as the professor reviewed his work. Orok's expression did not change. His species lacked facial muscles, but the slight shift in his posture, the way his fingers momentarily hesitated over the screen, betrayed something unexpected: confusion. A few more professors arrived, their robes gliding soundlessly across the floor as they examined the data. More whispers, more sideways glances. Logan clenched his fists beneath the desk. He wasn't sure what was worse: the possibility that he had truly failed, or the fact that his failure was now a spectacle. Finally, Orok straightened. "Henderson," he said, his voice perfectly neutral, "your answers do not align with the standard models. They are incorrect." Logan's mouth went dry. "Professor, with all due respect, could you show me where I went wrong?" Orok hesitated. It was the smallest pause, barely noticeable, but it was enough for Logan to realize something was off. The professor should have been able to point out his mistakes immediately, yet he was hesitating. The alien's 6 eyes blinked in a slow, deliberate sequence. "I will review your exam in further detail." Logan exhaled sharply, forcing himself to nod, but he could feel the eyes of the other students on him, the silent judgment, the amusement in some of their expressions. He had come here to prove that humans were capable of standing alongside the greatest minds in the universe. Instead, he had just made a fool of himself. Or had he? As the professor walked away, Logan caught a glimpse of the screen displaying his results. The equations were still there, exactly as he had written them, but now they were being analyzed by multiple computational models, the data being fed into high-level quantum processors. And then he saw it. An alert flashed across the screen in small, flickering text. The Academy's AI system had flagged his equations as unrecognized mathematical structure. Potential anomaly. His heart skipped a beat. Maybe he hadn't failed after all. Logan sat at the edge of his bed in the Academy's dormitory, staring at the holographic display on his wristband. The screen projected the results of his exam, the glaring 0% burning into his vision like a brand. The laughter of his classmates from earlier still echoed in his mind, but what unsettled him more was the reaction of Professor Orok. The Zellian was known for his precise judgment and absolute confidence in the Academy's mathematical principles, yet in the examination hall there had been a moment, however brief, where the professor had hesitated. Logan clenched his jaw and exhaled sharply through his nose. He had reviewed his own work multiple times before submitting it. The logic had been flawless, the equations balanced, the conclusions undeniable. He hadn't just solved the problems, he had refined them, streamlined the calculations into something more elegant. But the system had marked everything as wrong. The notification from the Academy's AI still hovered in his mind. Unrecognized mathematical structure. Potential anomaly. He needed answers. Pushing himself off the bed, he grabbed his wristband and activated the navigation function. The device projected a soft blue path, leading him out of his dormitory and toward the Academy's research wing. His footsteps echoed in the dimly lit corridors, the polished floors reflecting the neon glow of the embedded guidance strips. Unlike the rest of the Academy, which buzzed with activity during the day, the research sector was eerily silent at night, its halls lined with sealed laboratories and reinforced doors that concealed some of the most advanced experiments in the galaxy. He reached Professor Orok's office and hesitated. The door's biometric scanner flickered with a faint green glow, indicating the professor was inside. Taking a steadying breath, he pressed his palm against the scanner. The system hummed, scanning his identity before unlocking the door with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was bathed in the deep purple light of Zillion ambient illumination. The walls were lined with floating data panels, equations shifting and recalculating in real time. At the center of the room, Professor Orok stood in front of a massive holographic display, his 6 eyes shifting between different sections of Logan's exam. The professor did not turn when Logan stepped inside. "You should be in your dormitory, Henderson." Logan squared his shoulders. "I need to understand why my answers were marked wrong." Orok's fingers twitched slightly as he adjusted the display, zooming in on one of the equations. "Your answers do not align with our models. The grading system is automated. Incorrect structure results in an automatic failure." Logan stepped closer. "But the Academy's AI flagged my work as an anomaly. That means it wasn't just wrong. It was something new." The professor finally turned, his luminous eyes narrowing slightly. New does not mean correct. Logan held his ground. It also doesn't mean incorrect. A moment of silence stretched between them, the only sound coming from the soft hum of the processing units recalculating the equation. The professor studied him for several seconds before finally gesturing toward the holographic projection. Explain your logic, Auroch said. Logan moved beside him, his fingers instinctively reaching for the interface. The system recognized his intent, allowing him to manipulate the data. He pointed to the original Academy-approved solution. The current method works within a fixed dimensional constant, he began. But that assumes space-time behaves linearly in all galactic regions. That's not true near singularities. And it's definitely not true in interdimensional rifts. I redefined the constant as a dynamic variable, allowing it to adjust based on gravitational fluctuations. He switched the display to his own solution. This eliminates computational waste and stabilizes equations that previously required massive energy expenditures just to remain functional. Auroch observed in silence, his eyes flickering between the two solutions. Logan could tell the professor was processing the information at an immense speed. Finally, Auroch spoke. This model contradicts centuries of established galactic physics. Logan straightened. No, it expands on them. It doesn't break the rules. It shows that the rules were incomplete. The professor's fingers moved again, running Logan's equations through multiple simulations. The results flickered rapidly, processing faster than Logan's human eyes could follow. Then, abruptly, Auroch deactivated the display. You will meet me in Laboratory 7 at first light, he said, his tone unreadable. If your theories hold, you will need more than words to prove them. Logan swallowed but nodded. He turned toward the door, his heart pounding. He had expected resistance, he had expected dismissal, but he hadn't expected interest. The automated door to Laboratory 7 hissed open as Logan stepped inside. The room was vast, lined with walls of shifting holographic displays and glowing consoles that projected complex mathematical models into the air. At the center stood a massive quantum computational core, its cylindrical structure humming with barely contained energy. The moment he entered, the atmosphere felt heavier, charged with an intensity he had never experienced before. Professor Auroch was already there, his elongated form positioned before an array of interactive holograms, his 6 luminous eyes moving in independent directions, simultaneously reviewing multiple sets of calculations. Without looking up, he gestured for Logan to approach. Stand here, the professor instructed, pointing to a raised platform near the quantum core. Logan obeyed, his heart pounding as he stepped onto the designated spot. The floor beneath him shifted slightly, scanning his biometrics before stabilizing. Auroch's fingers glided over the controls, and suddenly the entire laboratory transformed. The walls darkened, and holographic projections filled the space around them, shifting into a 3-dimensional representation of Logan's equations. The numbers twisted and rotated, interacting with simulated gravitational fields, energy currents, and dimensional fluctuations. It was a living model of the universe, reacting in real time to the variables Logan had proposed. Your work has been analyzed by the Academy's primary AI, Auroch said, his voice carrying a weight Logan had never heard before. It detected inconsistencies. Your equations suggest an alternative framework for interstellar calculations, one that conflicts with the standard laws of galactic physics. Logan tightened his fists. It doesn't conflict, it enhances. If the model works, we've been making calculations based on incomplete data for centuries. The professor remained silent for a moment before he entered a command into the system. A series of simulations activated, running through established models and comparing them to Logan's. The results fluctuated rapidly, shifting between approval and error, as if the system itself couldn't reconcile the differences. Then something changed. One of the simulations stabilized. A deep hum resonated through the lab as the quantum core processed the new model. The energy fluctuations aligned perfectly, reducing the computational waste Logan had pointed out. The results weren't just promising, they were impossible by the Academy's current understanding of physics. Auroch's eyes locked onto the data, his fingers twitching slightly. It was the first time Logan had ever seen him display uncertainty. The professor studied the projection for several long moments before finally speaking. Your model suggests that energy distribution in space-time is not a fixed constant, Auroch stated. If this is correct, the fundamental principles of interstellar travel, gravitational navigation, and even temporal mechanics must be reconsidered. Logan swallowed hard. He had known his work was different, but he hadn't expected it to shake the very foundation of galactic science. The professor turned to him, his expression unreadable. The implications of this discovery are dangerous. Logan frowned. Dangerous. Auroch deactivated the holograms, plunging the lab back into its dim ambient glow. If your equations hold, the energy expenditure required for intergalactic travel could be reduced exponentially. That knowledge is not something the ruling factions of the universe will accept lightly. A cold weight settled in Logan's stomach. He hadn't thought about the political consequences of his work. He had been focused on the science, on proving himself. But now, standing in this lab with one of the greatest minds in the galaxy acknowledging the significance of his discovery, he realized that knowledge, true revolutionary knowledge, was never just about discovery. It was about control. Auroch stepped closer, his towering form casting a faint shadow over Logan. The Galactic Science Council will convene to review this data. Until then, do not speak of your findings to anyone.